And with that, I'll shut up and I'll turn it over to Steve and.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Techniques.
Good morning.
We've been a sponsor for about 15 years in Metro Group. So it's nice to see so many old friends here today. I haven't seen too many new people that I didn't know. So old friends, presumably here to support me, or you thought this was a roast, I'm not sure. But, anyway, this is a subject that's really near and dear to me because I've spent most of my 40-plus year career helping other people with their careers. My job titles, some of my job titles I've had along the way were recruiter, director of employment, contract recruiter, which is a hired gun recruiter. I had my own business for a while, which was included a lot of search research and name generation. I also was with Gladry, where I interviewed John Leocani at one point, then now RSM, and built and ran the search group before turning it over to John. So sum total, probably over 10, not probably, definitely over 10,000 people I've interviewed. So I've seen some really good interviews, and I've seen some really bad ones. So hopefully we'll distinguish between the two. I'm, this clicker works, I don't know if I can get closer here. One second. That's what's supposed to happen. Hang on one second. There we go. By the way, I called this session landing the triple crown of job search, because we're kind of in horse racing season, and the triple crown is really, when it comes to job search, is really three primary areas. There's more we cover in outplacement, but one is your personal branding. So hopefully you're doing a good job getting a resume, cover letter, handbill, elevator speech, LinkedIn profile. That's the first leg. You got to get that down, the whole messaging. The second leg I call the uncovering job opportunities and researching job opportunities, which you're doing either through electronic means, social media, LinkedIn, or especially through your networking. And so again, if you're getting the right message, going to the right people, getting the right people, places, events, associations, websites with the right message, what's left? The third leg of the triple crown of landing a job, the interviewing skills. So that's what we're going to focus on. This is interesting how it worked in practice here. We'll do it that way, I guess. Okay. I'll just run up there. That's okay. I don't think I'm going to rely on my mouse anymore. Okay, a little warm-up exercise to get you going. Instead of wearing your interviewee hat, which many, and how many of you are in transition now? By show of hands. Okay, so a good number in transition interviewing. But you're all senior level managers in this position, senior executives. And I'm guessing that at some point in time, the role was reversed, that you were the interviewer. So how many of you have actually done interviewing? At some point in time, you have interviewed candidates. Probably almost everyone in this room has interviewed candidates, or were part of an interview, or for sure you've probably interviewed even contractors that came to your house when you're looking for services. So quick exercise. And maybe Kathy, you can help me out. We'll divide this into two columns. Kind of pluses and minuses. So here's the question, here's the exercise. Think about in any interviews you've conducted, anything the candidate did that either turned you off, the negative side, or turned you on. Okay? So, very quick. Very quickly, we'll go around to some of the tables.
Not good listening skills.
Not good listening skills. That didn't listen to what you were saying. Anybody else from this? Come on.
They talk too much.
They talk too much.
Like their answer was just
Beyond the answer
Yeah.
that you wanted. Okay.
Very negative on their prior employer, or
Well, that's a good one.
very,
Yeah,
negative.
that's a good one. It's one thing to talk about your reasons for leaving or looking. I always write on my resume, those RFL, reasons for looking, reasons for leaving. But if you make it sound like a bashing session, that's not going to fly too well.
Coming in unprepared, not knowing about the opportunity in the company.
Yeah, I'll tell you, for an old timer like me, I remember when prepared meant running to the library I mean, if you can't be prepared for an interview these days with everything that's out there at your fingertips with the internet. Craig?
So let's go positive, quantifying their accomplishment.
I didn't hear.
Positive.
Oh, positive side, you did quantify their.
Quantifying their accomplishment.
Okay, so that was one thing that impressed you with a candidate. Other, good or bad?
I would, I don't know how to say this, but such a high value on their own intelligence that they wouldn't fit culturally.
Okay. Just kind of arrogant.
I was trying to be polite. I was trying not to be negative.
And here's the problem. Here's the problem with interviewing. It's a real fine line between wanting to boast about yourself and say good things versus being arrogant. And I suspect if you have an introverted personality, probably things that many people won't see as boasting to you sounds boasting when you say it about yourself.
Yeah, it was interesting the way it was laid out. You could immediately tell it would be a toxic person for your environment. Like that would take the rest of your team down.
By the way, I'll give, before I forget this tip, this is one I've told people, if you ever feel like, I'm boasting, I'm saying too much about myself, it's going to look like I'm overly arrogant. A good way of doing it is to relate it in the third person. Like say, well, I've been told by this boss, or on performance reviews they've mentioned this, or people know me have said this about me. It's a little bit better than saying, I'm great, I'm wonderful, I'm a self-starter, I'm results-oriented, I get everything done. But if you have a boss that said that, you can tell them that's what the boss said.
Do you prefer that approach to saying like, we accomplished this, or, not being so
I think you have to mix it.
me,
You can't be
me,
so many we's that it sounds like, well, did you really do it, or you just held their coffee while they were doing it? Okay. Yeah.
Regardless of the position, lower level position, came in so underdressed, it just felt disrespectful.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get into that next, because that's gonna be in one of the keys to interviewing.
Taking a second before answering. So I would put a question out there, and if they do take a second or two before they respond, I appreciate it. I feel it just values a little bit of intelligence.
That was a plus, you're saying?
That's a plus.
Okay.
If it's like 30 seconds, it might be.
I thought maybe they finished your question, or I thought maybe they finished your question before they even answered that.
On the plus side, relating what they've done to what the job is about that you're looking for.
Okay, what is relevance? Phil?
Steve, ask good questions.
Yes, good questions. Okay. Well, some of you apparently have somehow used your spy system to break in my presentation. A lot of this is in there, but we're going to go into more detail. Okay, this is great. And I wanted you to see it from turning the tables because, again, as interviewee, you're preparing, but think back to when you interviewed other people. What turned you on or off about people, about what was going on? Okay. Here's a tip. I think so far I haven't seen anyone else write this down. We know about these three phases of the interview when I go into that. But this I think is I'm going to patent as a Carlucci tip because I've never seen it specifically said this way, where you should think of the interview really as three parts that you must ace each part. In other words, these are all included in an interview. We know that. The beginning, the middle, the body of the interview, and the close. But when you go into an interview, one tip I want you to think about is I want to ace the first impression part, the body of the interview, I want to do great on that, because most people think of just the body of the interview. And then I want to have a strong close. Because I've seen interviews won and lost because people either didn't come out of the block strong or didn't finish strong. So that's the tip one of the tips I absolutely want you to remember is go into every interview thinking about acing all three parts. First impression, well, obviously first impression's huge. What makes up the first impression? Things like this. Somebody said about dress or appearance. Appearance, image, body language, gestures. By the way, most people I think they gesture more. Most people think I really talk with my hands too much. You know what? I think it's better to have more and be more animated than come in stiff as a board. Because I've had people walk in, they look like, like this. They were rigid, they were scared looking, they didn't look confident. And that was a bigger turn off as opposed to somebody who is, just open, uses their hands, uses their body language. Think about it, when you watch a comedian. Comedians are I think the best known for holding your attention. You know, I think every speaker can learn a lot from a comedian. You ever notice what the comedians do? They use so much body language typically. I remember a guy was telling a story. So we walked into the office with my little boy, and we sat down. You know, he's using all the motions, all the body language. I'm not saying you're going to use all that in an interview, but people remember animation, and they like you to be natural and not closed and guarded. I had one other guy who on LinkedIn. Not only did this guy come in stiff as a board, but his LinkedIn picture, you know, he looked like he was buried or something. The guy looked so stiff. And he wasn't that kind of guy. He was a very nice guy, but he didn't have that impression. Obviously, the handshake, confident style mean a lot, and likability. I always use this the American Idol example. Generally, a great singer wins, but it's more than just being a great singer. You have to have that likability factor. So if you want to think about first impression, think about that. Have you created kind of a likability in general?
How do you do that?
Just a warmth, a friendliness, a natural kind of approach. You know, if you look extremely guarded, tense, scared, you know, frown on your face, it's just not going to work for you.
I think it's being interested in others and be interesting at the same time, but that warmth factor to engage somebody else.
Can I ask one other question before you move on?
Yeah.
Any tips for first impressions on phone?
Yeah, stand up and smile even though they can't see you smile. Yeah, you'll feel more relaxed that way. Just don't fall asleep, please, so relax. But yeah, that helps. That helps. You know, and again, and don't sound so robotic either. You know, it's good to be rehearsed. Again, there's a lot of these things have continuums. It's good to be rehearsed, but not be so robotic. Be prepared also. Obviously, we talked about being
Another
prepared.
question.
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious about your thoughts on a couple of things. One is, I've heard that interviews are, you can hire for, you can train for skill, you can train for, so you can't train for motivation and attitude and personality. So, of the interview, how much is fit?
I'm going to get into that.
And then the other one is because it's a first impression sort of question. From a sales perspective, this is an example of a coworker of mine went to interview at a company. We had both been trained the same way. If you go to any appointment and they leave you waiting for more than 20 minutes, you leave, because your time is just as equally important as theirs. That happened in an interview. He left. He actually got called for a second interview.
Really?
And then at that point, he turned it down because he thought, if that manager doesn't have enough respect for me, then that's not the environment I want to be in.
I don't know. That one I'd have to think about. That one I'd have to think about.
I didn't say it was going to be an easy question. I just want it's one of those.
Crap happens, so you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, that might tell
I
you
didn't
something
say it was
about
going to be an easy
the
question.
That might tell you something about the culture. One story I want to tell you about first impression real quick. One place I was director of human resources, the receptionist, the front receptionist worked for me. And even though I would have the resumes in advance, we would still ask people to complete the application, or at least put C resume and a few other details on the employment application. So the resume would get passed, the application would get passed back to me. So you got it, I already had the resume, but the application would be passed back to me. One time I get that, gets passed back to me through the receptionist. She's got a little note in there. This guy was very arrogant, very rude, thought he was God's gift to the world, you know, was almost insulting in the way, you know, it's like she said, well, we still have to fill out this application. I shouldn't have to fill out an application. You know, I don't have time for this, you know, that kind of thing. We didn't hire that person. But basically, you never know where first impression is going to start. So the moment you come in the door, maybe in the parking lot, it could have a bearing. And by the way, this recommendations of work samples. You know, we generally tell people that your resume is going to be 1 or 2 pages, maybe 3. But once you get into the interview, hey, you want to bring work samples, you want to bring samples of where you fit in an organization chart. I'll tell you one of the most impressive, getting back to the pluses and minuses, but one of the most impressive interviews I had with a guy was a chief information officer. The guy was from Colombia, had a heavy Colombian accent. So obviously I want to know if he was competent, but I also want to know if he was going to have good enough communication skills to make his point. Very early in the interview, I said, well, tell me, how did you structure the IT department? He said, would you mind, Steve? And he goes up to a board we have there, and he starts laying the whole thing out and showing me how he did it and why he did it. That was one of the most impressive things. But I've also had people who came in with samples of some reports that they had put out before, or early in my career when I hired engineers, a part that he had designed. You know, people remember those kinds of things, anything visual like that. So what I'm saying is, when you get in the interview, if you want to bring in a 3-ring binder that includes all kinds of things, recommendation letters, sample performance reviews you had, work product, hey, anything goes when you're in the interview. Right, John? They can bring anything when they come in, right? All the tools.
Bring the tools and be ready to go to them when you need to. Absolutely.
You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. It's one of my favorite lines. Okay, so again, you've got to ace that. If you come in and you really haven't done those things, you're starting bad. I'll get back to the horse racing analogy. If the horse leaves the gate late, it may never get back into the race. Okay, the body of the interview. There's a lot of things we talk about, but let's start with trying to keep it as more of a dialogue. Do you ever in an interview maybe where it seemed like an interrogation, and it might have been partially your fault because maybe you let it become an interrogation. You know what I mean? That's where the interviewer is constantly shooting questions at you, and maybe they're not even shooting open-ended questions. Open versus closed-ended is a closed-ended question is one that's typically can be answered in yes or no. Well, if they shoot a bunch of things like you, like they're reading off a checklist. Did you have M&A in your background? What kind of inventory analysis did you do there? What system were you on? Blah, blah. If that's what it is, one after the other, like it's a firing squad, then it's not going to feel comfortable. It's not going to be a good interview. So one thing you should get used to doing is more of a natural dialogue. You can start with right away with if the interview says, so Steve, how you doing today? I'm doing fine. How about you? Are you in a good day? Doesn't hurt to make the interview feel good and show you have some concern for that interviewer. But let's take example of how a typical interview question might sound. Maybe you got an interview question that was, how much travel are you accustomed to? Or how much travel are you comfortable with on the job? Well, you could say something like 25%. It's okay, it's an answer. A better answer would be 25%, and I've actually had several jobs where we did have that much or more in the job. An even better answer might be throwing in something like, besides my kids are mostly grown right now, so I'm not being called away for soccer and baseball games. That's a especially good answer if you know one of your competitors is being called away for soccer and baseball games. But then, to make it even more of a dialogue, it might end with, why, about how much travel do you anticipate there being into this job, and to what locations, okay? Then it becomes a dialogue. I've thrown back a question with a question, okay? So get used to doing that. I'm not saying with everything that's asked, but that's how you turn it into a dialogue, and you can do it with just about anything. Some say, you have experience with mergers and acquisitions. Yes, and here's what I did, blah, blah, blah. And do you expect the company is going to be in an aggressive merger or acquisition mode? Again, you can do it with every question. It turns it into more of a dialogue. Oops. If I said, let's invent interview questions. If I said right now that was one of our exercises to loosen you up, we'd never finish, right? It'd be an unlimited amount of interview questions that you could be possibly asked. And they could be very open-ended. Don't you love those questions? Tell me about yourself. Yeah, I was born in a log cabin. But basically, there's all kinds of questions. But believe it or not, you can pretty much narrow them down to these three categories: competency, fit, and motivation. When most people think of an interview, they think about the competency side. That's probably the first thing you think about going in is, boy, I want to impress this company with what I've done and how I've done it and how much I've accomplished, and I'm really good and I quantify everything, blah, blah, blah. And I've had interviews with candidates that I've referred, either because I was the internal recruiter or I was doing the search. I said, how'd the interview go? I'm sure, John, you have this all the time. How'd the interview go? Oh, I think it went great. And then you call the company. Well, John Doe thought it was a great interview, and how'd it go? Terrible, we're not going to hire him. What? Well, why? Because the other 2 points, maybe the person didn't do well. Why? He's a jerk. That's what we didn't like the person. You wouldn't fit us. You know, this person's style, and that's why, frankly, if your philosophy as an employer, do you really hire from your competitors? I had one company I was doing a search for that said, I don't want to hire any of my competitors, they're a bunch of losers. I don't want losers, we're winners here. I'd rather hire a winner in another industry than a loser within our industry. So fit is very important. And the third one, the type of question you'll get is motivation questions. You know, just because you show up for an interview, that doesn't mean you were motivated to do the job. You could have been somewhat desperate, and I'm sure we've all gone on interviews where, yeah, I'm not sure, but I'll take this interview. Well, if they sense that, well, first of all, if you're not sure, it might not be a good fit for you anyway. But if they sense that, it's not going to work out well. What's one of the #1 reasons for rejection that we hear all the time? How about overqualified? Did anyone ever have it where either the interviewer told them that, or someone in the company told them that, or it was kind of implied that they were overqualified for the job? No? I'm sure a lot of you have had that. Okay. Guess what? It doesn't mean that you were overqualified. What they were telling you is, I don't think this person is going to be motivated to do our job. Either they had more challenge before, or they were making more money before, or they had more responsibility before. I don't think they're going to last. Because overqualified is not really a reason for rejection. It comes back to this motivation. In January 2012, I had quadruple bypass surgery. Do you think I said to the surgeon, yeah, you've done a lot of these, you're not going to be interested in my case. So what I'm saying is we want the most qualified person. We want the most qualified person for the job. It's just that when it comes down to the job is, yeah, is this person going to be really motivated in long run or longer run than just, a month or 2 or 6 months to take the job? But it really all comes down to these 3 questions. So what happens is if you're getting into an interview, and pretty soon they're not talking about your competency areas anymore, watch for these. They're trying to determine whether you do fit or whether you're really motivated. And if you keep selling them on your competency, guess what? At that point, they might not care. Look, I know you're competent.
We just hired an office administrator. And I'm not taking credit for this question because I got it off of Google search or whatever. But I thought this was the best interview question that I think fits into both fit and definitely motivation. And it was, tell me about something you were extremely successful at that you never want to do again.
Very good.
I thought it was a great, I'm not taking credit having created it, but I thought because it just came back to say, yeah, if somebody said, my office manager goes, well, what would they say? I go, what if they went someplace and they made them stuff 2,000 envelopes in a direct mailer, and the direct mailing was extremely successful, but they don't want to ever do it. It may say, look, they're not going to be willing to do anything we ask them to do, or they may not be motivated to do this. And I just thought it was open-ended, and it definitely didn't talk about
I'm
confidence.
going to get to your question in a second, but by the way, the other thing I always tell people to do in my career coaching, which is how I spend most of my time now, is you can think of anything you do in either things I know I'm good at, and things I really like, things I know I'm good at but don't like, and things I don't really like but I'm good at, and I don't like it nor am I good at. I tell people at home, I'm responsible for handling the cat litter with the cats. I'm extremely competent in that area. However, I don't think I'm looking for a role like that. So.
I was going to say, it'd be interesting to put sort of a weighting on those. I've hired people at our levels, and I would tell you that competency is sort of like table stakes, and it's how well are you going to get along with my team and be a contributor, right? You're not getting the interview based on being able to take your competent, and competency is observing. right? You can validate competence.
Right, that's right. And yet
It's
most people, when
something that
they get in the interview, their first thought is, I gotta prove to this company just how competent I am. So they spend so much time focused on that they don't necessarily pay attention to these other areas. And again, if you're not a fit, you're doing yourself a service to recognize that too and pulling out of it. Okay. Here's a saying I like: 3 things 3 times. Have any idea what I mean with this? I'll tell you. So you get in the interview, you have all these things, good things you want to say about yourself. How many do you think they're going to remember? They're not going to remember 5, 6, 7, 10 different things. So it's not a good strategy to say, boy, I'm going to give them as long a list as possible on why I fit, why I'm good. Because they're not going to remember it anyway. So 3 things 3 times is you're better off saying, boy, what 3 things do I really want to nail here? What 3 things do I want them to absolutely know? And when I say 3 times, I mean early on, these should come out very, very much toward the beginning of the interview. In the body of the interview, of course, and they should always be supported by stories. I mean, anybody can say, I'm great, I'm wonderful, I walk on water, I'm results-oriented. Anyone can say that, but if you can't back it up, it doesn't mean anything. And then at the close, it's got to come out in the close. Okay? So think of this. Don't think about trying to, like you're scoring points. Wow, I came up with 25 different things that they should hire me on. If they can't remember them, it's more important to pick 3 things that they're actually absolutely going to get excited about and going to remember. Okay, so how do you impress people in an interview? Over the years, what I have found, the best 2 ways to impress people in an interview are the stories you tell and the questions you ask. Okay? As I started to say before, anything you say about yourself means absolutely nothing if you can't back it up with a story. And you should get used to telling the story, whether you're asked the behavioral question or not. Behavioral interviewing, is that new to people? I don't know how many people heard that term, used it. Yes? No? Behavioral interviewing basically is where the interviewer asked an open-ended question. Tell me about a time when you made a significant change in a company. Tell me about a time when you turned around an employee and now they became a valuable employee. Tell me about a situation where you had to convince the entire management team to your side, your point of view. Tell me about a time, blah, blah, blah. Now, some of the worst interviewers are people who just ask close-ended questions. Every question can be answered by a word or 2. Did you do that? Yes. Do you have experience in this? Yes. Which system did you use? I used this system. If you get a bunch of questions like that, you as an interviewer must turn that into a behavioral type question. So how do you do it? Let's say they say, well, did you work with Great Plains software? And just say yes. A good answer is, yes, for example, I worked with it at this company and that company. At this company, we were looking at blah, blah, blah. This doesn't have to drag on forever. But you can answer their questions by starting off, for example, here's what I did. Because if you're just answering like yes or no or short word, you're not going to be remembered. It's not going to validate what you're saying. So very important that you back it up. So we're going to talk about how to do those stories. Because somebody said one of the objections was if a candidate talks too much. I think you might have said that. Well, here's a way of keeping it kind of succinct. So try and remember these words. We call either star or car or par. So if you remember those in your head, star, car, par. So they give you a question, and now you say, here's a situation we had, or this is a task I was faced with, or here's the challenge that we had going on in the company, or here's a problem we had. Okay, that's how it starts. That's how your answer starts. It might start with the words, for example. A is always the same in these. The action. Okay, that we know the situation, we know the problem, we know the challenge, we know the task. What was the action that you took? What did you lead? And then R, obvious, always the same too. What was the result of that? I recently did. We do a lot of practice interviews too. We do video recorded practice interviews. And the person did a pretty good job on the first 2 letters. But then at the end, when I was doing the critique, I said, so what happened? Now, I deliberately was trying to be a bad interviewer there because I want to see if the interviewee was going to give me that information. So make sure you cover these. Now, at first glance, you might say, well, boy, that's going to take, I don't want to take 10 minutes to answer every interview question with a story. So we're going to give you, we'll have access to the presentation anyway, but I'll show you how brief these things can be and still cover either the star part or car. When we get to this in a second too. You know what? Let me cover this one too. I'll cover this one now. The big O. If you really want to spice up the story, the big O. I don't know if anyone else does it. You'll read about Star Car Park. I might have invented the big O too. The big O is obstacles. So here's an example. Somebody says, well, Steve, how was your golf game over the weekend? I said, pretty good, but I got to tell you about one shot. It was 200 yards out and put it on the green, 6 feet away from the pin. Now, if we have any golfers here, yeah, that's pretty good. 6 feet away from the pin, 200 yards. Then I say, oh, did I mention I was in 4-inch rough? I was 4-inch rough. I wasn't on the fairway when I made that shot. Oh, and there was an overhanging branch. I had to keep that ball low. Did I tell you about the creek that crossed right in front of the green? Oh, the green was tiny, and it was sloping. Boy, by now, it's now become a miracle shot, right? Now, I'm not saying you didn't do it every story, but if you got some situations where you were really up against the odds, throw in the big O, too. Okay, let's see how brief a story can sound. It doesn't take that long. And again, the action is huge, and the results. I'll go to the longer one. If you time me, this should only take about a minute. So I'm just going to read this to show you that it will cover these elements. So let's say the question was, tell me about a time when you delegated a project effectively. Typical behavior type question. I've always taken pride in being self-reliant and doing whatever needed to be done to complete a task. However, recently there came a time when there was just not enough hours in the day to get everything done by the deadline. The first thing I did, again, in the action now, I told the situation. The first thing I did was to evaluate and prioritize each project, including what needed to be done and approximately how much time each would take to complete. I then evaluated what skills and experience were needed to complete the project and compared that with the other members of my department and selected the person I thought could best handle it. I approached that person, laid out the project, including the critical time constraints, and told them why I had selected them and how I needed to rely on them. Because he understood exactly what needed to be done, he was able to complete the project on time, and I gained a valuable lesson in delegation. Now that probably took about a minute. Now that might be a little brief because you might want to throw in some more quantification of what happened and go in a little more depth. But the general rule of thumb is these should not take, if it's 3 minutes, that's a long time. You should be able to do your stories in 2 minutes, typically at most. Okay? Again, we'll give you these. I know it's hard to read from here, that's why I read it for you too. Okay, so we give you a chance to pair off with somebody right now. Pair off. We won't take a long time to do this, but here's your question to answer. And again, you don't have to write it all out. You can go off the cuff on this. Suppose the question was, tell me about what you feel is one of your greatest strengths. Okay? Quickly match up with somebody and answer that question, but do it in like a star car or car fashion.
You stole my story. I go off on a software job, and I get my title where mutual respect for parents. Manifest itself.
Even if there isn't.
Well, you can name your answer. I don't usually expect that. It's not like you go out to a job.
Anything I will.
So you really couldn't do what practice.
Okay, we're in our wind down. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, let's go. Paul, ceasefire. Everyone, okay, close it. Stop. Okay, good. If you went longer than that, you took longer than the 2 or 3 minutes. Anyone hear some good stories? Anyone have bonus points if anyone actually threw in the big O too? Anybody? Didn't have to. Okay. Can I get at least one volunteer? Or volunteer someone that you heard? Yeah, okay.
No, I had obstacles for trying to design a studio for my clients, and I have obstacles. I have an engineer helping design it, and then I have a Swedish design director who has no conception of budget. So you have 2 people who will not talk to each other.
Right.
And it's my job to make them look at my budgets. And that was my obstacle, was getting these 2 guys to find some common ground.
And so what was the situation and the action result?
The situation was we had to design to build a studio for the
Okay.
public. The action was getting the trust from my part of both these people. One who's very budget oriented and one who's.
And how'd you go about doing that?
Meeting meeting with them, showing appreciation, looking at their designs, and saying, well, if we kind of build this into, if we build this into Don's design here, or we stay within budget,
Okay.
and just showing alternatives.
Okay, and the result was, it
The
worked?
result was a studio that was designed well enough that when Eddie Lambert, the CEO of our client, saw it, he asked for a second studio.
Good, great. Okay, excellent, excellent. So you have the idea of how to structure it. But think along Star Park Car, it'll help you structure it so you don't ramble on, that you stay focused. That's the idea. Impress people by asking questions too. And again, I already talked about the counter questions you can ask while the interview's going on. But there's some good questions. Here's just a few of them, and again, we'll give you access to it, but what do you want to see accomplished in the next 6 months? How will you measure success? How will the person in this role support these goals? Who will I work with internally and externally, as an example? What will be all these? Or you can then ask some other detailed questions about the position, about the manager, challenges. As a general rule of thumb, what I tell people is, what would you be asking if you were in the job today? This is your first day in the job, and you're starting to talk to people to probe the situation. I think those are good questions. Maybe they won't know the answers, but if you start showing them you're thinking about all those important factors that you're going to need to know to do your job effectively, that would impress me. When I was 26 years old, I was interviewing engineers. I'm not an engineer by background, but a couple things I would learn. I could see their enthusiasm and their interest and the degree they can get into detail when talking about, and just hearing what they would do, how they would ask questions about the role and the process. Oh, wow, this person really knows how to dig in, and they'd hit the ground running. Were you going to ask something?
Yeah, I understand the question is really important, and when I'm on the other side, people are asking me questions, you can gauge just by their questions where they're coming from, and that's really good. But what do we, I think you may have just answered it, but I was trying to think, what are we trying to really get at? And that's to show the enthusiasm, to show your intelligence, to show your what are you trying to get at?
Well, first of all, you show your intelligence more by asking a question than telling them about how great you are.
Right.
But if you can show them you're asking some things that are really going to help you operate effectively, you're going to say, boy, this person knows how to go about. They wouldn't just be totally wandering around aimlessly. That's why I think it's really impressive. I can't remember who did this, but at one point in time, someone showed me how they went about a whole diagnostic process for something that they were doing. I think it might have been a merger and acquisition activity.
Yeah.
Here's what I go through when I'm going through that. Here's actual checklist of what steps I go through. Here's the questions I'm asking.
Okay.
Wow. If I had any doubt that this person knew anything about M&A activity, I don't doubt it now.
Right. Okay, that works.
Okay. Pretty obvious, but don't ask the self-centered questions. What are self-centered questions? Any other questions? Yeah. When do I get my first pay increase, and how much vacation do I get, and what's the insurance? You can ask those, but don't ask them then. You ask those when you got it hooked already, when you know they want to hire you. You have plenty of time to wait for the offer, and when the offer comes, you don't have to answer on the spot. That's when you can go over the details and ask to see the offer, and ask to see the benefits plan, and ask to see if they're willing to give you the bonus plan and all the financials and this kind of thing. The worst can happen is you might say to yourself, well, geez, if I knew that 2 interviews ago, I would have dropped out. Okay, worst case scenario. Best case, you waited until they were already interested in you before you asked those self-centered questions. Okay. This is a friend of ours. Kathy and I know Bill Burnett. We have a number of his books. But there's also some interview theories on creating a subliminal bond with the interviewer. Did anyone ever see Bill do his presentation? Okay. Well, a lot of it is how you create that rapport so you get a bond with the interviewer. And without going into detail, because I encourage you to read his book, he talks about how if the interviewer feels good about themselves, and you happen to be with it at the time, they're going to feel better about you. And I won't tell the whole story, but one quick way of having that happen is if you happen to, in the course of the interview, not right away, but maybe say to the interviewer, well, you've been here a while now. What are you most proud of that you've been able to do here? Now, I know if you do too much of that, it looks like you're driving the whole interview. It could be annoying. But if you get the interviewer, again, it creates more of a dialogue, and if you get the interviewer feeling good about themselves, subliminally, they actually feel better about you. Another technique that can be used, and again, if you don't do it and make it too obvious, oops. If we can't do it, okay, yeah, I don't know if I put it here, but, another technique is mirroring the interviewer. So if the interviewer is, kind of being open, yeah, maybe you're going to be open in your gestures. If the interviewer is very direct, then you're going to be maybe want to be more direct in your answers. Again, be careful about it. If the interview goes like this, and suddenly you scratch your head. but that's something else I've seen and heard. And again, if it's done casually and not so obvious. Handling objections. This comes up a lot. I tell people, you don't want to bring out negatives about yourself, but if you can turn what might seem like a negative into a positive situation, it works better. So in other words, if the interviewer has already said to you something like, I just don't think you're going to be happy with this job. You have much more responsibility. If they've already said that to you, then you might not be able to change their mind. So how do you be proactive? Before it comes to that, you tell them why you're motivated. You don't say, oh, I think you're probably going to think I'm not motivated. Don't bring out the negative. Just tell them, well, one reason I was really interested in talking to you today was because, and I love this, here's one I've used in my career. Use the buffet example. First time we go to a buffet restaurant, what do we all do, most of us? We check out everything, right? We eat too much, we try to test everything. So I had responsibilities in my job where I was an HR director, I had all kinds of responsibilities. Later in my career, I wanted to focus on just talent management, talent acquisition, talent development. Sort of like the buffet line. Well, I'm there second time, now I know what I like. Okay, so there's nothing wrong if somebody said, well, you've been in this kind of role before, you've had all these responsibilities. Don't wait for them to get to that. Say, I've had more responsibilities, but I'm interested in this because after having a variety of things, this is what I really like to do. This is what really excites me. The fact that you have this in your company, this is what I get more excited about than anything else, and I'm really motivated for a job like that. Again, don't wait until they've already brought it out as a negative. Okay? So that's what I mean about being proactive. And obviously, don't make the interviewer feel uncomfortable in the interview. I don't know if this ever happened to you, but I've had people that totally wanted to dominate the interview, or wouldn't stop talking, or worse yet, where it kind of insulted my intelligence. So, you're in human resources, so you probably don't know much about what I do in this, but it's already they're assuming that I'm an idiot, So, basically, you want to make sure the interviewer is comfortable. Make it easy to relate to them. Show them that make them feel good about themselves. As I said before, very important. Okay, finally the closing. Again, one of those three things you must ace. People often forget to do this. So I'll show you an example. They might say, pretend I'm being interviewed. So Steve, do you have any other questions? Well, I've asked some throughout the interview, but no, I don't. Well, thank you very much for coming. We'll get back to you in 2 weeks. Boy, that is about the worst close possible. It should sound something like this. Do I have any other questions? Now, maybe I do have a question, but let's say I didn't. No, you covered them pretty well, but I just want to let you know, I'm excited about what you said today. I was really interested in the fact that you're looking for someone that does this, this is one of the responsibilities of the position, and because I've done that throughout my career, not only do I know I'm good at it, but I know I really enjoy that, and I would really welcome the opportunity to do that with your company. And I want to thank you for your time. And then you might ask them about timing and things like that. But that's a power close. I was once on an interview with a national sales manager when I was 30 years old at the time. He says, well, what'd you think of that interview? And I said, no, he seemed like a good guy, good image, good presentation. But he didn't close me. We got down to the end and he didn't close me. I want somebody who's going to close me. You want them to, the interview to end, know that you were really motivated about the position, that you're excited, that you listened to them, because you're repeating back certain things that they said, and how your background relates. If you leave and that hasn't been done, you left wimping out. You want to come, start strong and end strong. So I think on that, that is probably, let me see if that's the last slide. Yeah, keep up the momentum. Again, you can ask what's the next step. But again, show them that you're listening, show them that you're motivated, show them how your background relates, and why you're a good candidate. Of course, thank you for the time. Questions?
Do you have any suggestions or any tricks or anything with more and more I keep hearing, you know, people aren't getting the, we've gone beyond, we've gone from the, you know, from the telephone screen, maybe a face-to-face, but then the Skype interview. Any suggestions when you're on the Skype interview side?
Well, I mean, even in the Skype, you know, if they're going to see you, so you want to look well. You know, these points work in everything. You know, if it's in person. Quite, Skype is the next thing closest to being in person. But yeah, all these things work.
Your body language, Rich, is really important in Skype.
Yeah, if you've never done a Skype interview, you test everything out,
Yeah.
including the view. If you need to elevate your laptop, this laptop is sitting flat, which may have them looking up on your chin. That's serious, right?
Yeah.
Set that thing up, because you're on, it's
Yeah,
TV,
practice.
right?
Practice. Have a friend or spouse or whatever.
Can you just flip to the last slide for a second? I didn't get a chance to finish that.
Yes.
You know, sometime in Skype, they won't put a picture up. You might be a teleconference number too. We've seen that. You can upload your picture, so at least they're looking at a picture of you when you're talking.
Oh, Jerry.
You know, in terms of feedback, I think we all want feedback, especially if we don't get the silver or brass ring, whatever. How do you approach somebody after you've been, quote, rejected? Or do you?
Well, first of all, let's assume that you didn't go through a third party. If you went through a third party, a search firm, that's where a search firm can help you a lot. I'm sure John gives a lot of feedback to his candidates on what happened, what they could do. Don't do it in the interview. What I hate to talk about it, making the interviewer feel uncomfortable. Imagine the interview ends and I say, so what do you think? Huh? Am I the ideal candidate or what? Did I miss anything? Did you want to? That obviously is going to make the interview uncomfortable. I don't think it's that bad if you do it in a way that maybe start out with maybe even an email that says, I realize I no longer being considered for the position, but it would help me to know anything I can do that would strengthen me in my candidacy for something like this in the future. And then maybe you can follow up with a call. They might not answer that, but at least they'll come to expect maybe a call.
But you'd start out with the quote, written.
I probably would to tip them off that you might want to, so they won't be caught off guard. But I definitely wouldn't do it at the end of the interview. And I've had people do that. So what do you think?
Do you think it's okay at the end of the interview to say something like, hey, everything we've talked about today, I'm really enthused about this position.
That's good.
Is there anything that I haven't addressed that would give you comfort that I'm right for the position?
I wouldn't push it too hard. Because if they think you're the worst person in the world, they're not going to tell you on the spot anyway, most likely. Sometimes I might tell you they don't think it's a fit for something, but no, don't push it there. Any other?
To me, it seems it fits such a big piece of the whole thing. Is I think it's Steve Baker who it was back there that said that you basically your competencies and your background skills and all that are clearly been assessed before you can get there. And the motivation is pretty easily to determine through one interview almost, really. I mean, I would think, maybe more. But so do you have any specific strategies? Knowing, I know that all this points to that to some way to fit, but of thinking through as an interviewee before you get there, while you're in there.
Well, one strategy is, yeah, it's true on competency that they might all think that, okay, this person, I see what they've done on the paper, assuming they're not lying on this, it looks like they can add value. Okay? They may gloss over that, but you want them to remember is, yeah, that's true, but here's how I feel I'm different, what differentiates me from the other candidates. Then competency gets sharpened. Because that's what they want to know. They want to know how you can add value. I had an ex-boss who used to love this term after I interviewed people. So what does he bring to the party? You know, okay, so what's different about this person? What are we going to get from this person that we wouldn't get from any other candidate? That's one way. To put a little more emphasis on maybe even the competency piece, if you can show how you differentiate yourself. I may be done. Okay, well, thank you very much. Again, Steve Kalisher and Kathy Kilroy from the Mentor Group. 27 years of helping people with their careers, and no one else really in Chicagoland specializes in financial management people the way we do. We've been sponsors for 15 years, came from a CPA firm, so again, there's a way that we can help you with your careers and your hire either through companies or individuals. I love Steve. Thank you.